Cool, okay, so prynawn da pawb, diolch a croeso, Liam dwi, so rwy'n dilynydd rhwng gweithio gyda CDPS. I'm Liam, I'm an interaction designer here at Centre for Digital Public Services. First, before we get cracking on today, in case you're not familiar with CDPS and who we are, what we do, we partner with Welsh organisations to deliver public services that work for everyone. So what that looks like in a little more detail, we have 4 services here. So we have Meet the Digital Service Standard for Wales. This is guidance and resources for the public sector to meet the digital service standard. We have Learn Digital Skills, which are training courses for teams and leaders. We have design and improve digital public services. This is how we support people to design services through delivery projects. And we have connect with other digital professionals. These are our communities of practice and leadership events where we bring people together to meet regularly, share knowledge, experience, co-design, discuss ideas, form networks, lots of different things. I mentioned the Digital Service Standard for Wales a second ago. In case you're not familiar with that, the standard shows what good public services look like in Wales and how to achieve them. In a little more detail, it's grouped into 3 themes, which are meeting user needs, creating good digital teams, and using the right technologies. So obviously there's lots more information and detail about this, including the standard itself, on our website. Lots of examples, case studies, thank you, and lots more resources and guidance to help people meet those things. Okay, so with that, I'm going to hand over to today's guest speakers. It's Kay and Rob from Wrexham Council. Diolch both.
Diolch.
Hi everyone. Hopefully you can see our slides, they're up there now. So I'm Kay O'Flaherty and I'm Head of Service for Digital Customer and Cymraeg here at Wrexham. Today we're going to be looking at how we used process mapping and digital redesign on our housing application process. So this is all about how you go about hopefully getting a council house with us. Now, I'm sure you've all heard about Wrexham, but before Disney got involved, we were doing some great stuff just on our own, really. The digital team at Wrexham, we're quite a small team. It's myself, there's Rob, our team lead, who I'll hand over to in a minute. And we've got 3 digital projects officers who do a lot of the building and all the clever stuff that goes behind our digital processes online. And then 3 process analysts who really are the ones who get stuck into what we're going to show you today, the process mapping, the gathering all the data, working with the services involved and so on. And then we've got Michelle, who's our user experience and accessibility officer, and she also plays a key role because obviously everything we design, we want to make it easy to use. The expertise that we've got across this small team really has enabled the success that you can see there. So our customer platform is Granicus. And we've got over 100,000 accounts on there. And with that, we've got about 82% of people doing things through self-service. So if customers do ring the contact centre, they use the same scripts and same processes. And we've got over 200 processes now live. And we've been using process mapping, and we use the Engage software, which we'll tell you a bit more about in a minute. To do our process mapping, we've been doing that for the last 5 years. I think one of the other things is I'm also responsible for corporate complaints and customer service. So all the customer insight that we get, whether it be through social media, through our complaints, web feedback, our telephone data and telephone demand, failure demand, we bring all that into play as part of our user research and our discovery work before we build, so that we know, we kind of have established what the as-is looks like before we start to improve things. So now I'm going to hand you over to Rob, who'll tell you a bit more.
Hi there. Well, this was the situation back in 2023. So we had this is working together with housing. Our colleagues approached us, and we were keen to work with them anyway, because at that time we had no option for housing applications. So it was all paper forms, and being in Wales, obviously we had to adhere to the Welsh language standards, which literally meant we were paying to send out forms to people, of which they were then sent back, usually in prepaid envelopes, half of which we then discarded straight away and shredded and paid for the shredding, because obviously it all goes in with the secure shredding. So, you know, it's ridiculous. But, you know, this was the situation. We had a high failure demand because people had no idea what was happening, because they would fill in the paper form and hand it in or post it and then hear nothing for a long time. So customers' expectations were not being met. And the reality is we really had no idea how many forms are out there. So we had no idea how many people had received and whether or not they were waiting to come back, you know, and because people could pick them up here, there, and everywhere. So you had a variety of things out there, but there's no idea of how to meet that expectation. So it is a poor situation. So we started working with housing from that point onwards. And what we did was, working with the Engage process mapping tool, was to map out the as-is process with them. And I have to say, this was one of the most useful things we did in terms of talking with our customers to understand exactly what goes on. But over a long period of time, you got to really understand. So you don't just design a form. It's understanding what they currently do, and you have to, you know, you ask them, is that really what you do? And you get a lot of people in the room, not just managers, the real users, to help get a better picture of everything that goes on. Because we were saying there's no right or wrong, and there's no stupid here. Everything that happens, we need to know about. So we mapped it all out and got sign off. So that took a while, because we had several iterations, because in the meetings people would say, but we also do that. So you end up going down that avenue and writing it all out. As a result of that, we had a map that was signed off, that was an agreement of this is what we currently do, warts and all, the whole process. And then we met together as a team and came up with an initial to-be process, which we then worked with housing to say, this is what it could be, but have we factored everything in? Is there anything missing? Because we'd listened to everything that our colleagues in housing had explained, how these things happened, but we had to make sure that they bought into the to-be, that it wasn't being built to them, that they had ownership. So we did that. We had the meetings, we had agreement and sign off, and we made the necessary tweaks and adjustments to ensure that they were happy with the process. And that kick-started our build, which then led to the UAT and launch in April 24. So that was a whole slightly, I don't know if it was a whole year, that whole process. In the end, it probably was, wasn't it? But we wanted to go live with something that was definitely right, fit for purpose. There's more work to be done, but this gives you a very quick snapshot. And to be fair, this is not a visualized map. This is the map. It'll be part of the slides. If you want to know what we've been doing, this is it. Because we're not trying to hide anything here. That was the whole as-is process, and that is our to-be process. So that is what we've built. So simply visually, you can see that's quite different. There's a lot of avenues being removed. The idea is it's going to be simpler for the customer, and ideally it's simpler for us, easier to manage. Now, the thing with to-be is we've always aiming to make this a challenge to ourselves and to the organization, to not just build something that's a digital version of what you did before. So we try to be radical where we can. Ideally, we would have made this a fully integrated process with our back-end system. But that's a whole different discussion, but I'll come back to that. But basically, this is not, so if anybody asks that question, it is not a full-on integration, but that was because as we were doing this, housing were going to market to buy a whole new housing management system. So there was no point in doing any integrations with what we had, because that was going to be replaced in some capacity. So, and this is just to give you some stats, to give you an idea of where we're up to now. So we went live in February 25. We went live in May 24, but as of up to the end of February, we had 2,125 housing applications that were all done digitally. So 75% of applications currently are digital. And when we went live, which, to be fair, when we went live with no publicity, other than telling people, this is now available online by making it available online, that was pent up demand that people were waiting to do this online. It's very interesting watching it because I think people were flabbergasted that everybody was going to online. We still have the discussions with housing about, do you really need to be printing your application forms? Because ideally, our radical redesign was, don't print any paper, let's do this all digitally. But the reality is you have to work with your colleagues, and that's what we have. We do have a mixture of paper and digital, but as you can see, it's predominantly digital already. And we're in a much better situation. We've got customer expectations are now being better met. We have less failure demand. We have a huge reduction in printing and of manual re-entry. And more importantly, we've seen and continue to see a reduction in telephone calls because expectations are now being met.
I think just taking up from the we've still got that 25% that's been done on paper, and initially housing really, they were being really radical. They said we want to be digital only, but on a local level, many previously at the estate offices and other points of customer contact, there were lots of paper forms still around, and so though the kind of desire was there and that was the objective, I think on a local level that the paper forms were still going out. But I mean, just from a contact centre perspective, in terms of the telephone calls, previously when it was all paper, the abandonment rate on those lines was about 60%. So, and we had people ringing constantly all through the day, just trying to get through to find out where they were. Whereas with the new redesigned process, the customer gets notification of what's happening with that. Once they've pressed submit, they know what's going to happen next, and the timescales are managed. So all of that chasing's now gone. In terms of what's next, we're obviously going to build on digital take-up. And one of the things we've done now is we've provided all the estate offices with a tablet, and some support. We've got we've got Contact Wrexham, which is our main face-to-face office, really, which has totally changed its business model in the last 3 years and is now very much around offering digital support and skills rather than a reception where they help customers and just hand out forms and so on. So the team from Contact Wrexham have supported the estate office and provided them with the digital skills so that they can now sell digital, which is basically what it's all about, and to help people who come in to perhaps create an email address or to just guide them through the form if they're a bit stuck. Also, having a tablet in the estate offices sort of helps with those people who they've probably got the digital skills, but they've just not got the tech. They can't afford the tech. And often for many, many of application processes, it's easier to do it on a tablet than it might be your mobile phone, which otherwise might be your only device. The next thing we're going to do is build an eligibility checker. So again, very much like you might apply for a mortgage or a bank loan or whatever it might be, where you put some very, very simple, 5 high-level questions, answer those, and it comes up with, you're likely to be successful if you go through this process. Or, based on the information you've given us, you might be on the housing waiting list for 5 years. And here's some links to other support and other avenues that you can get into, private rented or whatever it might be. So it will be very much just very high level, but it will give an indication to people, not raise their expectations, and also then actually reduce the amount of digital forms we've got coming through. Because if we can support people to look elsewhere and to be able to sort their problem out a lot sooner, then that's what we're after. This is just also one piece of work. We're doing about 13 processes with housing at the moment, a whole suite of things around housing repairs, antisocial behaviour, and lots of other things. So we really are moving the team forward and away from paper, sorry, towards digital. I think, and housing won't mind me saying this, it was always the case. We would see housing officers walking around the Wrexham County Council campus with little bags that they'd pull along on wheels. I always just thought they were going on a nice mini break or something, but it was actually just full of paper forms. And it's kind of been a bit of a team joke, and with housing, we don't see so many of those cases being pulled around more. So apart from all the other stats that we've got to show for success, that's the one visual difference that we can see around here. That's really it from us. So welcome any questions, and back over to Mike and Liam.
Awesome, thank you so much, both. That's really, really interesting. I think like it's another good example. I found it's been really good in this Lunch and Learn series, seeing how like different organizations have been mapping their services and the different approaches to doing that. It's like a really good example of where service mapping is just so good for just, even if you already know those processes, it's just so good when you visualize it and you get it down into an artifact to just help you identify like, why is that step in there? And when you could see the amount of things that you just reduced by not simply by seeing it, but like the act of visualizing something makes it so easy to just go, that bit doesn't need to be in there at all. Why is that there? Whereas I think a lot of the time when it's living in people's brains, as it were, it's very hard to just see it in one place, isn't it? So I think service mapping is such a strong or any type of mapping really is just such a strong way to be able to make improvements, or at least begin the process of making improvements. I always thought it was interesting that, like, you said you'd spent some time doing this, but you didn't want to invest too much time because there was potentially going to be like a new platform coming in that would maybe change this anyway,
Well, the front end will very much stay the same. It was more the integration piece, because ultimately that's they've now procured their new system and they're in the implementation phase. So obviously once that's up and live and they've got their sort of the priorities in just getting that in and working and moving away from the legacy system they had before, we will be looking at then integrating these front office suite of forms into their new system, which will obviously then we'll be able to push and pull information from that, and we will no doubt have kind of to be maps phase 2, which will be even better because it'll be able to feed that information back to the customer,
and create greater efficiencies for us.
I think like with sorry, we'll move on to questions now. But I think that's the thing when you have these, like, these services which are living online, they're digital things, and they do require maintenance in the actual technical sense, but also the maintenance of the service itself, and as like platforms adjust and technologies get upgraded and changed, you have to like keep revisiting those maps to make sure that what's there is still what's needed, Really, really interesting. Anyway, let's move on to a couple of the questions in the chat. So, okay, Lubna has said, what were the challenges you encountered during this process?
I think, to be fair to housing, they were really up for it compared to perhaps some of the other services where we work where there's sort of quite a lot of fear and fear of the unknown. They were up for the challenge, and when we were mapping some of the as is, because it's a very, very inclusive session, that they were sort of having a laugh at themselves really and saying, we don't even know why these steps are there, and then one person would be like, well, I've never done that. So it was kind of quite a good environment to do that work in. I think one of the main challenges was the length of time it took, and that was often because a lot of our colleagues in housing were also involved in the procurement process for their new system, so they were being torn two ways really.
But I think that yes, I agree with you, Kate. I mean, they were very good at providing staff though who were doing the job, because what we found in other services, sometimes they'll say, we'll send the managers, the managers will be there, and you're like, but we need the people who actually do the work, because managers with the best will in the world don't know what happens. They
we haven't got a clue.
we know what's supposed to happen in the broader sense, but actually what happens on the day-to-day is actually really what does matter, because if you don't capture that in the map and you don't build the process, it's doomed to failure. Because if that thing that they do is of importance, as opposed to a routine that was set up years ago and no one knows why we do it, you always have to capture it, because it could be in a critical step, and so you need to factor that into the new design. But in this sense, I think that the challenges were doing a procurement at the same time. But thankfully that came in towards the end when we'd done the majority of the work. So, and I'd say that the other challenge was, unbeknownst to us, one of the reasons why the eligibility checker has taken quite a lot longer than we hoped was because they were changing the policy, but they didn't tell us that, which would have been helpful, because we would have stopped pushing to say, why aren't we doing this yet? Because we kept asking the question. But it transpired that they're changing the policy. So as of now, there is a new policy. So hopefully the eligibility checker will come online, and that'll help set some expectations. It's not going to stop people applying necessarily, but hopefully they'll apply knowing that it's unlikely they're going to get a house for 10 years or whatever.
Yeah, it's so complex, isn't it, when there's, services which are, there to meet user needs, but they're also there to meet like organizational needs, and then there to meet like policy needs. It's a real kind of complex puzzle that you're always trying to solve with those things, isn't it? Yeah, really interesting. Okay, so Gavin has asked, face-to-face, has the pivot towards providing customers with digital skills resulted in the shift to self-service?
I'd say yes, without a doubt. I think contact, we've got across the council, we've got now the estate offices and several other in-person places that are doing digital support, but Contact Wrexham definitely led on that. We had to change the location of where we were in some office moves a couple of years ago, and Contact Wrexham was part of that. So that was really the opportunity to change the whole brand, what it looked like, what they did, bring it from a really dated building into the library, which is where they're now situated, and also give the team that are in there the skills themselves, because obviously they've got to be able to answer the question. If someone comes in with a device that they're perhaps not familiar using, they need to know how to work lots of different devices. So they support people with their own devices and with the tablets that we've got in Contact Wrexham. We're also part of Good Things Foundation, so we have a data bank there, so we can give out free data, and also we partnered with our Wellbeing Hub with Good Things Foundation, and we had 50 devices as well that they were also given out, but there was sort of tighter eligibility around that. But yeah, without a doubt, and I've got to say, Contact Wrexham probably are in the top of the league table for the compliments they get. The amount that come through to me always, they always copy them into me, but they get flowers, they get cards, and people, there's so many people who've been in there of all ages who've said, I'm never going to be able to do this, or I'm too late for this. And, the one that stuck in my mind was an old chap came in, and I was there at the time, and afterwards, after the team had supported him, he said, I feel like I'm back in the race now. And, it not only gives them skills to be able to do things with the council, but it means that they can contact their energy supplier, or, things to do with health or whatever, talk to their children abroad or whatever it might be. So so whenever I'm having a rough day, I always go there, because it always makes you feel better about yourself.
Yeah.
What you've achieved.
Nice things to print out and put on your mantelpiece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, just conscious of time, so we've got a few minutes left. So yeah, Linda posted in the chat, we had a similar experience to what you were talking about a second ago, where our colleagues didn't know why they did something. They just did. And I always refer to the monkey ladder experiment, and this has always helped me to encourage people to make changes in process where some of those steps don't quite make sense anymore. Again, it's like I was saying earlier about that idea of sort of always revising these things, always like revising, but always reviewing them and making sure, like, are they still relevant? Are they still like doing what they need to do in that complex Venn diagram of like policy, intent, and user needs and all those things? It's very difficult. Okay, amazing. So we have got one more question off Luna, but I'm just conscious of time. So what I might do is, Luna, a little bit further up is Rob and Kay's email address. Did you post it in there, Mike? I'm sure I've seen that in there.
Yeah, I've seen it.
I did pop it in there, but it was to a link to my SharePoint for some reason. So I don't want to take people there. It's lots of files. But so I'm going to pop the contact details into the chat if Kay and
yeah,
Kay and Rob
of
don't
course.
mind.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so
Brilliant.
much.
But Liam,
so
I think we've got time for this question if you want to do this. I
Oh,
think we're
okay.
fine in terms of wrapping up. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, well, I'll just call this as the last one then. So are you thinking of rolling out the same process to other services, not just housing, since it has helped improve efficiency, and sustainability by saving time and money?
Well, this is the process, the way of working we apply to everything we do. So you saw that there's kind of 200 processes on there already across lots of different service areas. I think one of the main areas we're working at the moment is social care, isn't it? Both adults and children. It's probably a job for life.
Yeah, there's plenty to do there.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he's like, we just got these list of 200 services that were just the 200 then. Only 200, that sounds easy.
Yeah.
Amazing. It's good. And I think like having that not set design process, but like having that process that you work to and it is kind of tried and tested over multiple services is such a good, efficient way to work, isn't it? That does segue me very, very nicely into just wrapping up this session, which is around that idea of having a sort of a way of working, like a set resources, set tools, set sort of processes. Before I hand over to you, Mike, on the feedback for the session and the lunch and learns in general. Yeah, so we've been working on the area of service patterns at the moment. So I know some of our lunch and learns have spoken about these a little bit. So we're kind of exploring whether service patterns could kind of be utilised around Wales. We've been doing a bunch of research. We've been doing some co-design workshops. We've really been trying to sort of explore whether it's something feasible that could be used, like and organisations around Wales, which might help to feed into those existing design processes and existing team ways of working. You have a big range of platforms and things being used, so it's obviously that's a bit of a challenge. So that's what we're exploring at the moment. So as we progress with that work, we're going to maybe look at running like another series of lunch and learns which might delve more specifically into patterns, because there's so many people talking about service patterns at the moment, design patterns, which is amazing. Everybody's sharing. It's a very collaborative area of work, which is super exciting to be in. So yeah, so we might do that, and hopefully then we can feed that back in and work with yourselves and other people and just keep building that sort of area. Okay, with that's my sort of like wrapping up of the lunch and learns done. So thank you so much. It's been really interesting from DHCW, from Pobble, from Wrexham Council. I really appreciate you all speaking, and it's been so great to sort of see the similarities and see the differences in those works that you've been doing. Really, really interesting. So thank you very much. I hope you've all learned some really cool things from it as well. With that, I'll hand over to my colleague, Mike.
Thanks, Liam. And yeah, thanks for your awesome job in sharing these lunch and learns. It's been great bringing you to these. So yeah, just want to do a final wrap up. This is really important to us, is getting your feedback on these lunch and learns. How does it land with you? What have you taken away? Do the lunch and learns make sense to you? Do you feel confident to share some of your learning with others within your own organisation? So if you do have some time, we would really value your feedback. It really help us when we're sort of shaping the next lunch and learn series. So if you my colleague Josh has put a link in the chat, and there's also a QR code on screen there. But if you do have some time, obviously we'll follow up after this session as well with some useful links. Put Kay's and Rob's contact details in our follow-up email as well if you want to reach out to them directly. But thank you for being part of this series, and we'll look forward to being in touch with you soon on upcoming events and training courses that we're doing around this area. So diolch, have a good lunch, and have a good afternoon, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, thanks so much both. Diolch pawb.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Hwyl.